Hello Summoners, and welcome back to another ProGuides upcoming changes video. My name is Dan, and today I'll be going over all the upcoming changes that are hitting the Rift in patch 10.1. This patch will be the very first one of Season 10, and there are a ton of major balance changes. However, please do keep in mind that nothing is set in stone and changes can be made before 10.1 hits the live servers. Some of your favorite champions like Thresh, Jace, Kassadin, Sylas, and many others will be affected, so stay tuned for that. Also, today's question of the day is, looking back, who do you think was the strongest champion in Season 9? My answer has got to be Akali. Although she isn't in the best spot in the meta right now, Akali has had her moments when she was completely broken. Let us know all your answers in the comments below. And also, before we get started, are you always getting ganked? Constantly getting demolished? Don't worry, we got you covered. ProGuides is the #1 proven way to quickly level up your League of Legends skills. Whether you're looking for tier lists, champion guides, coaching, or courses from your favorite pro players, ProGuides is where you'll find them. Even players like Nightblue, Bunny Fufu, BoxBox, and Loco Doco support ProGuides. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and start improving right now. Alright, with all that being said, let's jump into the video. First up, we have a complete VFX rework for Thresh. This update will mainly focus on the clarity of his abilities while also modernizing his effects. Since Thresh is one of the oldest champions in the game, he was long overdue for some changes, and I'm glad Riot is taking the time to update him. Their previous VFX updates to champions like Lux, Olaf, and Ziggs have been spectacular, so I can't wait to see what they do with Thresh. Next up, the new champion, Sett, also known as the Boss, will be joining us on the Rift in patch 10.1. Sett is a top lane juggernaut who thrives in the middle of a battle. He has some unique and dynamic mechanics which allows him to survive for long periods of time, while also smashing his opponents with his fists. I've tried the champion myself on the PBE, and I can confirm that he's one of the most fun champions I've ever played. We'll be releasing an in-depth guide about Sett very soon, so make sure to click that sub button if you want to be notified of that. But if you can't wait and you want a short breakdown of his abilities and general playstyle, then check out our previous video for upcoming changes, which will be linked in the description below. Now, with all that being out of the way, let's jump straight into the balance changes. Starting with the top lane. Although a lot of players will find Jace quite annoying to lane against, he's actually been one of the weaker champions in the meta. Jace has received a lot of nerfs within the past few months, and his win rate has pretty much gone down the drain. For patch 10.1, Jace will receive a buff to his cannon form Q, Shock Blast, which will have its damage increased from 55 to 305 to 55 to 330. This is a small buff, and it won't bring him back into the meta, but it's welcome nonetheless. Now onto the jungle. Much like Jace, Sejuani has received a ton of nerfs during Season 9 and has been left in the gutter for far too long. For patch 10.1, Sejuani will receive a few buffs to help bring her back into the jungle meta. Firstly, her HP level has been increased from 95 to 100. Next up, her E, Permafrost, will have its damage increased from 40 to 200 to 40 to 240. Both these changes are very minor and will only help her out a little bit. For those of you who are unaware, the biggest nerf to Sejuani was gutting her passive damage a few patches ago, and it's likely that she will continue to struggle after these buffs. Next up in the jungle, we have a ton of changes coming for Shyvana. Shyvana has been in a weird spot recently where she didn't really fit into any role. Although she was the most popular in the jungle position, that was still only at a measly 2% pick rate. For patch 10.1, the Riot balance team are looking to solidify her stance as a jungler and are buffing her accordingly. First up, her passive Fury of the Dragonborn will now grant a stack with Elder Dragon. In addition to that, killing a Cloud Drake will now increase Shyvana's Fury gain by the same amount of ultimate CDR it's supposed to grant. Next up, her E, Flame Breath, will have its on-hit damage increased from 3.25% to 3.75% max HP, and the monster cap damage has been buffed from 100 to 150. All these changes are great for Shyvana Jungle, and you should try her out once they hit the live servers. Full AP Shyvana is a lot of fun, and most players don't expect the burst from your E. Lastly, in the jungle, we have a small change coming for Vi. Her ultimate, Assault and Battery, will now be unstoppable during the entire animation of her ult. For those of you unaware, you could actually peel Vi away from her target when she reached her target and was in the uppercut animation. This is a change that Vi mains have been waiting for a very long time, and I'm glad Riot decided to implement this. That's all for jungle, now let's run it down mid. Ever since his rework, Aurelion Sol's play rate has gone down by quite a bit, but his win rate has gone up. Asol has actually been one of the most sleeper OP mid lane champions in the game and is finally being toned down next patch. His passive, Center of the Universe, will have its damage lowered from 16 to 120 to 12 to 120. This is a very small nerf which only impacts his early to mid game, but you'll still be able to feel the reduced damage while clearing waves. Next up in the mid lane, we have changes coming for Azir. Azir has been struggling in the mid lane for quite some time due to the nerfs made to his Q's cooldown. For patch 10.1, the balance team are giving him a little bit of love by buffing a few parts of his ultimate, Emperor's Divide. This ability will have its wall duration increased from 3 to 5 seconds, and the damage it deals will be buffed by 25 at all ranks. Both of these are some decent buffs for Azir, but he will likely continue to struggle in the meta. There are a ton of problems with champs like Azir for solo queue currently, and increasing his damage is just the tip of the iceberg. Corki will also be receiving some buffs in patch 10.1, so you know what that means. Welcome back to the Corki plus Azir competitive play meta. Corki's ultimate Missile Barrage will have its damage increased from 90 to 140 to 90 to 160. This is a really big buff for Corki, since this is one of his main damaging abilities. Having 20 extra damage on a spammable missile starts to really add up, and it'll help Corki a ton. Despite some nerfs made to his kit a few weeks ago, Kassadin has still been quite OP in the meta and definitely deserves a nerf. For patch 10.1, Kassadin will receive the Aurelia treatment and have his movement speed lowered by 5. Come on, Riot, you can do better! And lastly, for the mid lane, we have a mini rework coming to Sylas. The balance team want to change him so that he can't be flexed into the jungle, but allow him to thrive in a solo lane. Firstly, his base stats will see a few adjustments. His base HP has been lowered by 60, his HP per level increased by 20, his base armor lowered by 5, his MR lowered by 7, and his MR per level increased by 0.5. Next, his passive Petrocite Burst will have its primary target damage ratio increased from 20% to 25%. On top of that, Petrocite Burst will now have 3 charges instead of 2, and the AoE range has been lowered by 100. Also, note that Sylas will now gain 60% attack speed when he has a charge of Petrocite Burst ready. His Q, Chain Lash, will have its base damage changed from 45 to 145 with 60% scaling to 40 to 100 with 40% scaling. However, the secondary damage on his Q will be increased from 45 to 145 with 60% scaling to 60 to 240 with 80% scaling. In addition to that, the slow duration has been lowered from 2 to 1.5 seconds, the cooldown increased by 1 second at all ranks, and the minion damage lowered from 55% to 40%. This means that it'll start rewarding players who can land their E and combo it with the Q rather than just using it for poke. Next up, his W, Kingslayer, will have its cooldown changed from 14 to 12 to 14 to 8. The mana cost in this ability has been increased from 45 to 60 to 70 to 110, and the damage has been increased by a whopping 20% bonus scaling. However, the damage amplification when targets are below 40% HP has been removed, and the base healing has been lowered as well. In addition to that, the healing amp at 40% health has been lowered from 75% to 50%. Lastly, Sylas' E, Abscond and Abduct will have its cooldown reduced from 14 at all ranks to 14 to 10. Also, this ability will no longer grant a shield, and the damage has been increased by a huge amount from 70 to 130 with 20% scaling to 80 to 280 with 100% scaling. Overall, these changes are going to make Sylas players more of a bursty style champion who's rewarded whenever he lands his E. Not only will it do him a ton of damage now, but it'll also let him land the second part of his Q, which does a lot more damage as well. I'm not too sure how I feel about this update, to be honest. I know for a fact that he will be much stronger in the meta, but the direction that Riot is taking him isn't really to my liking. Turning a unique champion like Sylas into a complete burst mage feels a bit off. That's all the mid lane changes, now onto the ADCs. Kalista hasn't been doing too well recently and is being buffed for patch 10.1. Her HP level has been increased from 89 to 100, and her armor per level has been buffed by 0.5. Both these buffs are decent for her, and although the numbers are small, they will definitely add up in the later stages of the game. Varus is another ADC who hasn't been doing too well recently and will have a few buffs next patch. His Q, Piercing Arrow, will have its cooldown lowered from 20 to 12 to 18 to 10. In addition to that, the Blight Stack detonation cooldown has been reduced from 4 seconds to 3 seconds, which is great as well. Varus mains will be loving these buffs, and Poke Varus might return to the meta once again. And finally, onto supports. Firstly, for supports, we have a few changes coming for Nami. Her E, Tidecaller's Blessing, will now empower basic attacks and spells. Empowering a spell will deal 33 to 66% damage to non-champions when used one AoE ability. Empowering a spell will deal 33 to 66% damage to non-champions when using one AoE ability. This is a gigantic buff for Nami, and she will start seeing a lot more play. Having this new effect will allow her to synergize with spellcasting supports much better, and I can't wait to try her out in 10.1. Zyra has been a little bit too strong on meta recently, and she will receive a few changes next patch. Her E, Grasping Roots, will now have its Vine Lasher slow lowered from 30% to 25%, but Vine Lashers will also be able to stack up to 2 times now. Alright, that's it for the champion changes. Now onto the item and runes changes. First up, we have a few changes coming for supports. Every single support item will be receiving a few adjustments. Spell Thief's Edge will now give you 25% base mana regen, and Frost Fang will grant 50% base mana regen. In the final upgrade, Shard of True Ice will have its AP lowered from 60 to 45, HP lowered by 50, but will now grant 50% base mana regen. Next up, Steel Shoulder Guards will now grant 50% HP regen, and Rune Steel Spalders will give you 50% HP regen as well. The final upgrade, Pauldrons of White Rock, will give you 100% base regen. Next up, we have Relic Shield and Targon's Buckler, which will have the same regen added as its AD counterpart, but the final upgrade, Bulwark of the Mountain, will have its AP lowered from 40 to 25 and 100% base HP regen added. Lastly, we have Spectral Sickle, which will give you 25% mana regen, and its upgraded version, Harrowing Crescent, which will give 50% base regen. The final upgrade, Black Mist Scythe, will have its AD lowered by 10, health lowered by 50, and now grant 100% base mana regen. Overall, these support item changes are being made to make supports feel like supports again, rather than secondary carries. It just felt like supports did way too much damage, so I'm liking these nerfs. And finally, onto the rune changes. We have a few adjustments coming for Eyeball Collection. Eyeball Collection was nerfed a few patches ago to allow other runes in the third row of domination to see more play. However, it does appear that the Balance team over-nerfed this rune, and it's being buffed this patch. Firstly, the AD and AP per eyeball has been doubled from 0.6 to 1.2 and 1 to 2. Next up, the complete eye collection has been lowered from 20 to 10, and the eyeballs per champion has been lowered from 2 to 1. These are some really nice changes, and a lot more players will start to use this rune again. Also, we've saved the best for last, and we'll cover the new skins now. We have 13 new skins that are hitting the Rift very soon. First up, we have Dragon Slayer Diana and Dragon Slayer Olaf. Next up, we have Dragon Slayer Trundle in this amazing looking Frylord Sylas skin. Next, we have the Guardian of the Sand skin line, which features Janna, Rengar, and Ryze. Pretty cool, right? And finally, we have the Mecha Kingdom skin line. This is by far my favorite, and I'm gonna purchase every one of these skins. Firstly, we have Mecha Kingdom's Garen and the Prestige Edition Mecha Kingdom's Garen. Next up, we have this super badass Mecha Kingdom's Leona, and also another badass skin called Mecha Kingdom's Jax. And lastly, we have Mecha Kingdom's Draven and Mecha Kingdom's Sett. That's going to be it for upcoming changes video for patch 10.1. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please hit that like, comment, and subscribe button to be notified of our next video. We'll be making sure to keep you guys up to date as fast as we can whenever the new League of Legends news drops. This includes anything about the new champion Sett, any new balance changes, new games from Riot Forge, or just general news, so stay alert for that. Also, just as a final reminder, we will have another upcoming changes video coming out next week, which will cover more of the balance changes. And also, make sure to check out ProGuides.com if you want to see huge improvements to your rank. Our coaches there can seriously help you improve your game before Season 10 starts and help you win all 10 of your placements. That's going to be it for now, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you out on the Rift.